Cultural appropriation is a very, very sensitive topic, but I do want to have a look at it from a slightly different perspective and just examine some of the difficulties that actually could arise from both sides of the coin. So let's have a look at that. Alright, so first things first, let's just have a look at a quick definition of cultural appropriation. So it's the adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from disadvantaged minority cultures. Now, when it comes to minority cultures or a minority group, by its original definition, refers to a group of people whose practices, race, religion, ethnicity, or other characteristics are less in numbers than the main groups of those classifications. However, in present-day sociology, a minority group refers to a category of people who experience relative disadvantage as compared to members of a dominant social group. Okay, so when it comes to cultural appropriation, what we're talking about is basically a group that has been previously disadvantaged and not allowed to practice their religion, their spirituality and things like that in context that I'm talking about. And practices from those groups, those religions, have been taken and used in or by groups that are dominant. So this is obvious when it comes to things like hoodoo and, white people taking practices from hoodoo and just using them without any complete disregard for hoodoo practice itself and no respect for it at all. Now, this happens often, and there are some problems on both sides of this. Firstly, we have the hoodoo practitioners who are very proud of their religion, are very proud of their tradition, their practices, and their ancestry. And this actually came about a few weeks back. Somebody commented on my video about creating a petition paper and said that the practice of actually writing something on the petition paper and then turning it 90 degrees and writing over that is a European inclusion. So I did question them, and it turns out that by European inclusion it means that, well, basically if a person does not have at least one black parent, they should not be practicing hoodoo. I get it. The history of hoodoo is wrought with slavery and, white dominance, really. When the slaves were taken from West Africa over to America and made to work in the plantations and things, they had to incorporate certain Catholic and Christian symbolism, the saints and things like that, into their religion so that they could actually practice without being basically flogged to death. Now, a lot of those people, the slaves that were taken from West Africa, were Christian to begin with, because Christianity had already made it into the country. But there was a whole synthesis that happened. Now, I'm a white man, obviously, you can see that. And I do practice hoodoo. I do practice elements of hoodoo. I do not call myself a root worker or a conjureman. I have not been trained by anybody officially, but when it comes to certain things in hoodoo practice, we've got candle magic. It's not exclusively hoodoo. Petition papers and prayer papers are not originally hoodoo. There's a lot of inclusion of Kabbalistic methods and techniques, not originally hoodoo. There is also, a lot of hoodoo root workers will work with The Long Lost Friend, a book, a spell book, and that is originally Pennsylvanian Dutch, which is Germanic in nature. And now, I know I'm a white person, but I think people need to stop and just ask, and just consider that just because somebody is white or black or yellow or green, purple, whatever, it doesn't put them immediately into a particular category. And my ancestry comes a lot from England and from Europe, but I also have another branch of ancestry which comes from Mexico. So somewhere along the line there, I am actually related to Mexican Native American Mexican people. There's a lot of difficulty when it comes to who actually has ancestry where. It's not just completely cut and dry. But does that put me into a minority group or a majority group? I'm probably fit into a majority group. But as I say, when it comes to things like hoodoo practices, candle magic, petition and prayer papers, using grimoires and Kabbalistic methods, and things like powwow, which is Native American, all of these things were incorporated into hoodoo, but they weren't original to the traditions themselves, and a lot of it was because they had to survive. But to say that I cannot use those things is a bit ridiculous. There's no reason why I can't use candle magic, because candle magic is used in many other traditions. It's not taken from hoodoo and incorporated into those traditions. Prayer and petition papers was used in Egypt long before hoodoo, or even introduction to it. And it was used by Christians, by many traditions. When we look at prayer papers, we also have to start looking at talismans and things like that. And worldwide, it's been used in various traditions and paths and religions. But when it comes to me doing a video on something like petition papers or candle magic or something like that, I learnt the practice itself from studying hoodoo, and that was a self-study, but it originally came from my study of actual hoodoo, and that's why I started using candle magic and such things. And so in honor of the hoodoo practice itself, I say that it is hoodoo. It's my way of honoring and thanking the tradition, the people, even the ancestors. Now, I live in Africa. I live in South Africa. And I have been accepted by the African spirits, the African ancestors, specifically Zulu. But, if you go into the history of Zulu, there are migrations that happened throughout Africa. And so a lot of the slaves that got taken over to America would have been in relation to the Zulu tradition itself, and the Bantu and things like that. So, I have been accepted by those ancestors, but, just because I'm white, it's immediately decided that I am culturally appropriating. I don't just do it willy-nilly. I don't just take this practice here and take that practice there without knowing its history, without knowing its importance to the people that it actually belongs to. I won't go around calling myself a root worker, as I said, because I'm not. That is specific to the tradition, and I am not a root worker. But you just got to stop and think, is this person actually just blatantly taking it without any consideration, or are they actually trying to honor the tradition itself, trying to honor the people by saying that it is hoodoo practice? And when I say that, I want people to be aware of the struggles that happened. I want people to be aware of the tradition itself, because tradition is rich. My own tradition is rich in culture and things like that. And I mean, if you think about it, I'm a witch. Now, when it comes to being a witch, and even a European witch, the same thing happened in Europe. It may have been a few centuries before what happened in America, but there was that synthesis that had to happen between the old pagan witch traditions and the Christianity that was coming into the country, into the areas. So that synthesis happened again, so that people could practice. They could carry on practicing their traditions without being persecuted. So being a witch, does that put me into a minority group? You know? So where do I fit? Do I fit into a majority group because I'm white, or a minority group because I'm a witch? Who knows? I don't know. For me, I don't really think about it too much. In my tradition, anybody can come along and join. Anybody can come along and if they show interest and they show a connection with the gods and spirits of the land, things like that, then I don't care what colour their skin is, I don't care who they are, as long as they actually do honour the land, they honour the tradition, and they honour the gods and goddesses. And I think this also needs to be said, that it's been noted in history that when a tradition or a group isolate themselves so much, they eventually die out. And that is sad. So I do think an education needs to actually take place. I'd prefer it myself personally if the minority groups and the traditions would come out and just educate people. There are some people doing it. There's a lot more books and information on the internet about hoodoo than there was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago it was very, very closed tradition, much like voodoo. But if the education was there, then people would be more aware of it, because I think that is probably the main problem. And discussions of white sage have come up recently, and this is probably the perfect example. White sage is, in America, in California area, is a very sacred plant to the native people of the area. And it has been over-harvested and is venturing onto the endangered list. And the reason for this is because of a sudden trend. White sage is a powerful herb to, cleanse and purify your home and bring protection and things like that. And it's used by Native Americans, and so it comes with this whole wow factor to it. But what's happened is it's become a trend, and therefore it has been over-harvested, and this has become a huge, huge problem. And the difficulty here that is that the people who are using white sage outside the spiritual tradition itself of the native people, most of them are not aware of it. They don't know. And so there's a lot more education that is starting to happen. There's a lot more people talking about it. There's a lot more information on websites about white sage actually being over-harvested, because the only way you can stop something like this is to actually educate people. And many of the Native Americans, they are quite happy to share, but that's not happening half the time. They're trying to share, but all these big companies are coming in and just taking, and they're like a virus. They're just stripping things away. They don't care as long as they're making money. That's wrong. That is very, very wrong. So an education needs to happen. If you can educate the people who are using these products, or using these techniques, or using whatever it is, to become more aware of the tradition itself and to bring honor back to the tradition. And, you know, taking white sage as an example, if all of those people are using the products, become aware of the overharvesting that's happened and how it's stripping away from the spirituality of the people, then less people will start using it. There are people who say that it's not their problem, they don't care, they'll carry on using it anyway. You're going to get those people. There's not much we can do about that. But less and less people will start using it if they become more aware. But a lot of people just don't know. So the less people start using the product, the less it's going to be sold, because there's no interest anymore. And therefore we can bring back honor to that spiritual path. You know, save white sage from becoming extinct and endangered. You know, the same thing happened several years back with peyote in Mexico. It was the reserves, the amount of plants were just decreasing, and luckily that got saved, as far as I know, as far as I'm aware. But anyway, so as I said, this is a very sensitive topic, and it's not something I take lightly. If anybody disagrees with anything I said, please just ask me in the comments, and let's have a discussion about it. There's no blame being pushed here and there and what have you. But I think that's what needs to happen. Discussions need to happen. Education needs to happen. It's no good just sitting in a corner and saying, well, these people are doing this and that, and they don't know why they're doing it, or they don't know the harm they're doing. You know, they've got to be educated about what it actually means, and what it actually means to you, to your past, to your tradition, to your ancestors. And once they become more aware, then they can start to honor the traditions themselves, and they can start passing that on to other people. They can tell people that, you know, did you know that this practice actually comes from this tradition, and this is what it means, and this tradition has a rich history. You know, I think you get what I'm trying to say, is that we can't just go about throwing blame here and throwing blame there. Things are going to get passed on. We live in a world now where information is shared worldwide. It doesn't just stick to one community and one area of the world. We are able to communicate with people across the world. We are able to have meetings with people across the world. We are able to have rituals with people across the world. We're able to practice spiritually and religiously with people across the world, worldwide, everywhere. So information is going to be passed. So instead of trying to take it back, claim it for yourselves and ban other people from doing it, I think it might be better to actually educate people in the actual practice they're doing, and what it means. Because, as I say, most of the people are just doing this stuff, using the products. They don't know why. They don't know the history of it. They don't know the problems that are actually occurring. You know, the information they got may have actually been from a source that didn't even bother to educate at all. So they don't even know. I mean, maybe they're doing something that is specifically hoodoo, or specifically Native American, or specifically Rastafarian, or whatever it is. But they're not aware of it because the source that they got it from didn't tell them. So they've got no idea. So the more education we can get out there, the more these things can be honoured. I think I'm just going to start going in circles now. So, as I say, if you disagree with anything, please let me know in comments, or you can email me. Just go to my website, leewjohnson.com. There's a contact form there. And I'd like to discuss it. I understand why it's a problem. why taking from a minority culture, religious minority, and just blatantly using it in another practice is a problem. But at the same time, it's, as I say, it's the way it's being taken most of the time is because of people not being educated. They just simply do not know. And they'll start doing something or using something because they were told that it does X, Y, and Z. They weren't told that it comes from this tradition or this path. And so that's why we need the education. So we've got to live with the world we're in today, and this is the world we face. So it's kind of like going down a stream in a boat. The current's going to take you where it's going to take you. It's no good trying to row back upstream again. Anyway, so I'm going to leave that there. We will be on the live stream Black Hat Chat on Friday. Hopefully we won't have load shedding here again. But as far as I know, it's not planned. So anyway, Friday, Black Hat Chat Live. Hope to see you all there. And we'll be just discussing familiars and the fetch, which we were supposed to do last week. So we're just going to carry on as we were. And that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching, and cheers.